truth, and life. Here is the Brother Leon Show. You better recognize.
What's going on, listeners? This is your boy, Brother Leon, and you are tuning into another episode of the Brother Leon Show. So today, we have with us filmmaker, director, producer, pastor, James Alford. He has a documentary film called The Light and the Darkness, and in that film, he talks about the reality of witchcraft. He also goes into the deliverance ministry and what it is. And so the one thing that I love about this movie is that he brings together a phenomenal cast. He has Apostle Ivory Hopkins, who is the general of deliverance. He also has Apostle Alexander Pagani is also in that movie as well. And he also has Dick Leggett of Derek Prince Ministries. So guys, with that being said, we are going to go and we are going to call pastor, film director, producer, James Alford.
Hello?
Hey, good morning. How you doing, Mr. Alford?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, real good, real good. I am so glad. We just did the introduction, so I'm excited about this interview this morning, sir, because
awesome.
The one thing that I so appreciate is that with your film, you're bringing out deliverance to the forefront, and the cast that you have for that documentary film is phenomenal. So I just want to say thank you for that, sir.
Oh, yeah, man. No, I thank God, man, and the opportunity to put it together.
Oh, yeah. So, hey, my first question. So who are you?
Well, I am a husband and a father, a man of God, a minister of the gospel. I guess you could say that's first and foremost. I'm a minister of the gospel, an apostle who has been called by God to serve his people.
Wow.
And to put it in a nutshell, that's who I am. And so however God wants to use me, whatever he's called me into, that's where I serve. And I humbly take whatever assignment God gives me to serve on this earth. Because, in this life, we only have so much time. We only have a season to be here. And so many people are running around trying to accumulate, trying to build for personal gain and stuff like that. But I've come to the realization that, we only have so much time. So we might as well just do what God has called us to do and serve God and be faithful. So when we get to heaven, he'll say, well done. And that's pretty much who I am.
All right. Thank you for that. So let me ask you, when did you get born again?
Well, it's kind of a I'll say this, man. I got born again when I was a very, very young child, around 10 or 11 years old. I mean, I can't remember a time when I, said, oh, I'm going to come to Christ initially, because I was so young. A Christian family, a grandmother, grandfather who had a church, raised in the church. My dad was a deacon in the church. So I don't really remember a time where I didn't necessarily believe in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
As far as from initial life. I know some people, they had a time where they didn't believe in Jesus, they got grown, or when they were 16 or whatever. But I always had, from my remembrance, just because I was raised in a Christian home, I always, from birth, not from birth, but, from a young child, I believed in Jesus. Now, I will tell you this, that when I was in college, and this is how the devil spun me, whereas those who never known Christ had to, come to him and repent and get saved and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I actually, never had that experience before. When I got to college, I started hanging out with some guys that were studying an alternative belief structure. And my faith had never been challenged up until that point in life. But I was like 20 years old, and I started reading these books, and this guy had rewrote the Bible, and he wrote all these books showing all the indiscrepancies in the Bible and all these types of things, man. And I found myself literally turning away from God. And I actually, and I know I wasn't 100% feeling that way, but I actually had just disregarded God, the Bible, Christianity, and all that based upon all these studies that I had been doing. And so there was a couple of years of my life, man, where I had turned away from God, turned away from Christ.
Yeah.
But I thank God that I did come back, not 100% until 2004. And that's when I can say I really had kind of like I don't know if you want to call it a salvation experience as much as it was a renewal, a coming back to Christ type of experience. In 2004, I actually committed myself, in my mind as an adult, committed myself to serving God and whatever He had me to do. And that was like February of 2004. And since then, I've been a servant, a minister, a leader of a church, and all those things from then on.
Wow. So let me ask you this. So can you say that you accepted your call into ministry in 2004 as well?
I think I look at how we grow in ministry. We're transformed. You know what I'm saying? But there's some things that you don't have the revelation for, I'll say.
Yeah.
And God hasn't done. He's trying to deal with you with your sin, and just some people know who they're called to be before they even get saved.
Yeah.
Whether somebody has spoken to them, minister has spoken to them, this and that or whatever. They knew what they were called to. I didn't know. I know the Lord called me to. I remember crying when 2004. I was like, right at 30-year-old mark, and I remember crying and just knowing that God had called me to be a minister. Okay, so it was a very, very general type of revelation. I knew I was supposed to serve beyond just saying I'm saved. Sometimes we get saved and we just live a saved life.
Yeah.
But there was a work. So I knew I got called, what I'm saying? I repented of my sins and just being, just very, very lukewarm in my faith for all those years. And I knew I was called to be a minister, but it took some time for God to really deal with me about the fullness of my calling, my anointing, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
It took some time for me to kind of roll into that. And I'll tell you this, I got to a point where God had called me to start a church. And so I thought with starting a church, I started an evangelistic ministry first, then I started a church. And the Lord told me, I'm a very detailed person, man. So if I'm giving too much detail, let me know.
Oh, no. Please. I love it.
I just like to give people a full understanding of everything.
Yeah.
And so I started evangelistic ministry first, and God told me to get a facility and begin a church. So I went out and got the facility, trying to be faithful. Everything God told me to do, I would do it like lockstep, man. So I got this building, but he didn't call me anything. Before then, he had only called me by my name. Okay. And so I got this building, and so I assumed, okay, I have a church. I'm a pastor, right?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm pastor. I got a church now. I'm pastor. So I started calling myself Pastor James and put on my flyers, and I invited people Pastor James and stuff like that. And I started a church, and man, when I tell you, we couldn't get any members, man. We couldn't get anybody. Maybe a few people would visit or whatever. But we had a whole church building, man. I couldn't get anybody to join.
Wow.
But the whole time we were being attacked by the devil, crazy stuff was happening. I know we have time to get into all the crazy things that happened, but all kind of crazy things were happening and stuff, man. And we went for 2 years, man, and never really had membership in the church. But we had a full building with sanctuary and all that type of stuff. So I'm all upset and confused. And what is God doing to me? He told me to get this building, but there's nobody in it, and just really, really frustrated. Ran to a gentleman who was a business partner of mine, and he actually was a pastor of another church location. And I told him about my struggle. I told him about the bills, and I spent all my money, took all my 401k and emptied it out trying to build this church, and nobody would join. And I don't know why God was doing this to me and all this type of stuff. Anyway, he told me, why don't you just come over to where I am and share my building and get those expenses off your back. Yeah. And so I did it. I got rid of all the expenses and asked God. God said, go ahead. So I went over there and I started having church services. Within maybe like a month of being over there, nobody still joined. An apostle came and started attending the church service. And he told me, he said, you're not a pastor, right? And so, that wasn't that wasn't the thing I wanted to hear, man. I had committed myself, spent all my savings and everything to start this church, end up not having the building anymore after the money I spent, moved over to a new location, still nobody's joining. This is what God's telling me to do, telling me to keep going. In the meantime, I had a major car wreck that almost killed me. Thank God I didn't get injured, but it literally almost killed me. And now a man standing before me and telling me I'm not a pastor.
Wow. How'd you take that?
Say what?
How'd you take that? Because I would be like, Lord, are you playing games with me or something?
Well, to be honest with you, it was almost like I don't know if I was offended as much as I just really want to know. I'm like, okay, all right. It was just how you just sometimes you just got, it's a weird feeling. You don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I went to a church and I started studying the fivefold. I had been reading books on the fivefold and stuff like that, but I said, well, maybe I'm an evangelist. I know I'm not a prophet per se. Maybe I'm a teacher because I like to teach. But I was confused. But I always felt like I really wasn't a pastor, but I had a church. I was supposed to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went to a church service, a random church service, somebody else's church. And there's a friend of ours that had a church. There's probably 200 people in there. Now preaching, I was walking out the door, and the guy didn't know me, never seen him before in my life. He pointed at me, and he said, was a pastor, soon to be an apostle, and he pointed at me.
Wow.
And I was, what? And then that same man of God who had been visiting the church for a couple of times, he came to me and said, you're an apostle, right? And I was like, I'm starting to hear this. And so I began to pray to God about it. And then the Lord began to deal with me about how I was an apostle of the Lord. And I wasn't a pastor. My gifting, my position, fivefold ministry position, whatever you want to call it, was that of an apostle. And so I was a little apprehensive because people don't receive the office of apostle like they do pastor or bishop or whatever.
Yeah.
In this life, we go along with tradition. Much of the United States, everything is, and especially in the church, man, there's a lot of tradition that's heaped in it. We do stuff not because necessarily the Bible is directly commanding us to do it, but because that's what we normally do. And you're in a church, you're a pastor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's even though the word pastor, I think it's only mentioned one time in the New Testament. And that's along with the other fivefold gifts. We take that word and we put that on everybody who's a leader. So if you want to be a leader in the church, you're a pastor, co-pastor, assistant pastor. That's the only leadership position. So I think it brings a lot of confusion. But anyway, so I said, Lord, well, people are not going to receive me. And I said, but you know what? What does it matter? Nobody's doing the church anyway. And they didn't receive me as a pastor. And man, when I changed my name to Apostle James, and then the Lord told me, he said, stop having services on Sunday. This was back then. He said, stop having church services on Sunday. He says, have your services on Thursday night, and that's all. And I'm like, Lord, what are you doing to me? You had me start this church. Now you're telling me I'm not a pastor after 2 years of no members. Now you're telling me stop having Sunday services. I said, you just drive me all over the place. Man, I stopped having Sunday service, started having Thursday night services, Apostle James. man, people started showing up at the church and joining the church.
Wow. That's
Not
great.
believe it. Could not believe it, man.
Wow.
So to put it in a short 5 or 10 minute statement, that's how I came into being an apostle.
Wow.
Of course, there's many different levels of growth and many different stages of growth in every revelation that God gives you and every ministry that God puts in your hand. There's different levels and stages of growth, and you have to be willing to live it out and be faithful to what God is telling you to do in that season. I would have never made it to that place if I had not been faithful and opened that church building and sat there for 2 years with nobody joining, dogs attacking people when they come to the church, people breaking into the church, running through the church, water ceiling busting and water flowing throughout the whole place and no members. I mean, wow. If I hadn't been willing to sit in that and then go exhaust all my 401k savings from a job, I would have never got to the place with the revelation of the apostle. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I know this is
all
not
God's training and development.
Let me ask you this. I know it's not even, it's not in the questions that I asked you. Was there any, during that time, because you're a married man, was there any time during that journey that your wife was like, are you sure you heard God?
Well, she never said those words.
Yeah.
But there's definitely been, the first parts of ministry, it's definitely some tribulation in the marriage.
Yeah.
And I would say mostly Satan's doing, but it's not, I wouldn't say it was 100% on her. I think it was 50-50. I mean, we used to get into a big argument before we went to church in the morning. It was crazy, man. In the beginning, man, we used to before I would preach, we had this big argument. So almost every Sunday, wow. We had this argument until we both got to the place where we said, "This is the devil." Sometimes you miss that because of emotions, because of the flesh, things like that, or whatever. Sometimes you'll miss the device of the enemy. And then so we got stronger, and then we said, you know what? We're going to make it a point to not, get into anything Sunday morning. And so that went away. And so, Satan, I'm going to tell you something. And this is what I tell people all the time. And I'm a very open person. I tell the truth, man. I'm not going to sit here and say everything in my life has been rosy since I've served the Lord. No, it's been some hell moments, man, because enemy, there's no limitation for what the enemy will try to do. Okay. So it's not whether or not he won't try it. I only have to give a list. Anything you can conceive or can't even conceive, he'll try it. Okay. Yeah. So it's not about whether or not he's going to try to do jacked up stuff and ruin your marriage, ruin your kids, ruin your finances. It's what you do with the attack when it comes. Okay. Yeah. And are you in a position to reflect it, overcome it, resist it, rebuke it, whatever. That's what it comes down to. Some can do it, and some let themselves be consumed, overtaken. And I've seen it on both sides. But it's all about what you do with the device to determine whether or not Satan is able to gain an advantage, I'll say, over you. And so, our marriage has definitely gotten stronger because of it. Because of understanding the enemy. My wife has a strong, powerful women's ministry. When she does marriage, she talks about marriage, talks about being a wife and a mother and all that type of stuff. And just from the experiences she's experienced to really be able to see. My first ministry, my first gifting is the ministry of discernment, okay? To be able to discern the light and the dark. And one of the things that consumes marriages and families is people not being able to discern the work of the enemy sitting up in your house. So, what I'll say with me, my wife, the Lord has allowed us to go to the school of hard knocks. We didn't take a class. We went through the school of hard knocks, and the Lord showing us step by step the devices, the games of the enemy to give us the strength to overcome and then help others to overcome. And that's what it's all about in the day, right?
Yeah. So can you almost say that was almost like your introductory into the deliverance ministry, those times right there, having to discern and know that this is the enemy?
Yeah, I had been being attacked, and I talked about some of that stuff in the movie. I had been being attacked by the enemy for years, man, having spiritual experiences, demons manifesting in the flesh at my house, dreams of devils attacking me and tying me up and all the time. I've been having dreams for years when I was a youth and a young man and stuff like that. And but that was the point where God was kind of bringing the transition over. So I saw the work of the enemy, I saw his devices and all that type of stuff, but I had no authority, no power to deal with it. And I was kept by others who had prayed, and others, I guess, who probably had a revelation for who I was or what God had called me to do, or my family had prayed. It kept me from literally dying in that season. And so it got to the point where God began to reveal to me who I was and the authority I had. I give you an example. During that time where I was at the church, there was no members. We had one girl, man. She was probably 21, 22 years old, and she had a young baby, okay? And she wanted to be a part of the church. Oh, it blessed my heart so much, man, that she wanted to be a part of our church. We didn't have any members. I've been struggling. Lord wasn't saying nothing. He just said, keep on going. I'm literally a grown man crying up in the church, laying out on the floor. What are you doing to me, God? This and that or whatever. So I get my one little precious member that wants to join. So me and my wife, we're picking her up. She don't have a car. We're picking her up, bringing her to church. She's like, she loves it here. And she just sit there and I just love it so much. I preach to her and my wife. Okay.
Yeah.
So one day we brought her to the church and she said, Pastor James, you mind if I go out and clean the front windows of the church? Oh, yes. It bless my heart, man, because I got this one member and she wants to serve and bless the church, right?
Yeah.
So I'm inside the church working. Next thing I know, I hear her screaming at the top of her lungs. And I'm like, what in the world? So I run out to the front of the church and I can see out the front window of the church. There are 3 Rottweilers attacking her. Literally, 3 Rottweilers biting her. I mean, I've never seen no dogs anywhere near there, man. 3 full-size Rottweilers biting her legs. She's about to fall to the ground. They're biting her. She's going backwards. She's crying. She's screaming. I didn't know what to do, man. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have nothing, man. So I literally, I don't know what came over me. I literally ran out the building, and they were literally within 10 feet of the front of the church windows. I ran out the building, man, and I came out the door, and I just said, in the name, it's like something came over me, and I said, in the name of Jesus. And when I said that, man, I could feel like an authority flow over my body. I said, in the name of Jesus. And when I said that, those 3 Rottweilers literally stopped biting the girl. They looked at me and they walked away. I mean, it was like they hadn't been attacking her. They just like nothing happened. They looked at me and they stopped and they walked away.
Wow.
So I brought her into place. I'm calling 911. Fire trucks, policemen showing up. They out looking for these wild dogs attacking young women in churches and stuff.
Yeah.
They never found the dogs, right? So she had to go to the hospital. I mean, it was all this stuff, man. And so I had another apostle friend that I knew while I had that particular building. And I asked him, I said, why did this happen? I said, I don't know what's going on. God told me to start this church. I'm supposed to be the pastor. I get one member, and Rottweilers attacked her. And I'm like all messed up. And the first thing he said to me, and I know we can talk deep like this because this is the type of podcast we're doing.
Yeah.
The first thing he said to me, he said, who is that woman? Caught me off guard. He wasn't nice about it either.
Mm-hmm.
He said, who is that woman? And I said, well, I don't know who. I mean, she's just a young girl who wanted to come to the church. He said, the Lord said, and he prayed about it and he got back to me. He said, the Lord said she was a witch. And I said, what? So I'm thinking, oh, well, we got, you know how it is. Oh, we got some brothers just talking reckless now.
Yeah.
They got attacked by dog. Now he's saying she's a witch. He said the Lord said she was a witch. And he said he sent those dogs to get her to leave you alone. And I said, okay. And he said, as far as the dogs responding to you and walking away like that, he said, he said, the Lord wanted you to know that you have the authority. And I said, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm like even more confused at that point. And so, so I was, I didn't know what to think. Now this guy who's been praying with me and coming by and visit every now and then the church and stuff like that, and just a friend, he's telling me that my only member was a witch, and and I'm like, well, she got attacked by dogs. I mean, what's going on here? There was a love and concern side of me that was like, didn't want to think about her being evil because she wasn't doing anything but clean the church windows.
Yeah.
And there was nothing else going on. So anyway, but she was out for a couple of weeks. She finally came back to the church. And she said to me, she was sitting in the church, and I was so happy to have her back. I just missed what the guy said. I said, I'm not listening to him no more. He talking crazy. She sat down and she said, Pastor James, he was like, he said, I want to bring my friend to church with me. And I was like, well, you can bring your friend. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, she got bit by dogs, but she's gonna bring an additional friend. Now the church is growing now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Here we go. We went through the storm. Now she's gonna bring her friend. That's what happens. People join, they bring other people and stuff like that. She said, but there's one thing. She says, there's one thing I need you to be okay with. I'm like, thinking, what do you mean? What are you talking about? She's like, it's a woman. And she was a woman too, right?
Yeah.
And we're lovers.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I said, that's fine. She said, no, she said, you don't understand. She said, I want you to accept our lifestyle as being okay. And I said, well, I don't accept your lifestyle as being okay because that's against scripture. I said, you're welcome to attend the church. I said, but we believe that homosexuality is a sin. And she was like, well, I'm not gonna come back unless you accept that.
Wow.
And I said, well, I'm sorry. I said, I'm not gonna accept that because that's against God's scripture. I said, but you're welcome to come. I said, I'm not gonna badger you because of your lifestyle. I said, we operate in love. I said, but we're gonna stick to our standard of the scripture, what is right and what is wrong. And she left.
Okay.
And she went out and began to talk against the church.
Wow.
So everything that Apostle said was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So so we just have to be careful as people of God, man, that we don't let deception, we don't let devices, we don't let schemes of the enemy come in and try to change what God has called your church to be.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much what I got from all that. Had another leader come to the church, and he was with Seventh-day Adventists, but he said he had an organization. He just wanted to help church, didn't have a denomination.
Yeah.
And so he would come and he would help out. And so I was thankful once again. Him and his wife and their kids would come, and he would help us with Bible study, and he would play the drums or play the keyboard for no charge, and just helping us out. And we had a conference at the church, and he made sure we had chairs and all that type of stuff for the conference. So really, really helpful. And one Sunday, he never tried to change anything. And one Sunday, though, he got up and he was extremely angry. And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? He said, I need to speak to you, Pastor. So we go to the back, and he looks at me and he says, you need to tell your people they need to start going to church. They need to go to church. They need to quit their jobs on Saturdays, and you need to have a Saturday service. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, man, I said, we have service on Sunday. I said, I believe you can have church any day of the week. I said, but Sunday is the time that we're having right now because that's the time we have. I said, I'm not telling anybody to quit their job on Saturday. And he was like, okay, and he left the church. And he calls me on the phone and threatens to come and fight me, beat me up. all that type of stuff. And
Wow.
so,
Over Saturday?
man, when I tell you I've dealt with some devils, man, I mean, this is we're just talking about a 1% of the warfare that I've experienced with devils.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, over just all of a sudden want us to have a Saturday service, literally threatened to come and fight me at the church.
Wow. That's crazy.
And and this was like the only guy who was at the church helping us. I mean, and we once thing I told you, we had no members.
Yeah.
And so the Lord was showing me how in this season the enemy was sending waves of tests and devices to try my heart. Okay. To see if I would succumb or give in to the devices of Satan. Yeah. Okay. And this is what he does to all church leaders. Mm-hmm. Okay. Some are able, and it comes in different levels. I was attacked with, bringing homosexuality in. I was attacked with bringing the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine in. I was attacked with, all kind of stuff, man. All kind of demonic devices that were try to be true. Pride. I had one guy come to the church, and he told me that if I come talk to him, he gonna have 1,000 people at my church. He had a big church. He said, but I knew he was about the flesh. He was about the lust and the flesh. And he came to me. He says, I like you. He said, I'm gonna make your church large. He said, you'll have 1,000 people. And I said, no, but I realized there were different waves. And one by one, these people would come, and they will all be devices to take me off track from the direction that God. And this is all because before I came into the revelation of being an apostle. But all devised to take me off track from the direction, the purpose, the calling, the assignment that God had over my life.
Wow. I'm glad that you overcame, because your path could have very well been diverted.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you this, man. The church, there's a church that opened up right next door. And this is how God tries your heart. He tries whether you're true. You know what I'm saying? It's not about a big building with a bunch of people. You know what I'm saying? But this is how God tries the man of God, the woman of God's heart in building a work. We caught up between doing God's will and being successful in the natural person's eye. There was a church that opened up in the building, literally right next to us, probably 50 feet, 100 feet away from our building, was another building that opened up, and it was a church, another church, right? They had hundreds of people, man, show up at the church every morning. There used to be cars in the grass. Man, we got cars in the grass, man. Folks really want to be there. Yeah. We had cars in the parking lot, cars in the grass. People was parked down the street, walking to the building and stuff like that. So I go over to meet the pastor. I'm like, okay, it's called the Power. It was called the Power Center. So I go over to meet the pastor, and I thought it was something strange because it's a whole bunch of men in there. They were working like worker bees, man. It was a pastor. He was a nice dude, down to earth, chilling. And it was all these dudes in there, man. They were like worker bees. I was like, wow. I said, you got all these men working so hard. I mean, they were working, man. They were working, man. I was like, man, I've never seen guys be so, usually I'm just being honest with you because I keep it real. Usually women are more so on fire for building ministry and church. So you'll have either a mix of men and women, or you either have a lot of women.
Yeah.
Because men are hard to get to do stuff. I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
But he had all men. So I was like, wow, that's amazing. And but I found out that he was married to a man.
Wow.
So anyway, come to find out, I did some research. He was married to a man, and it was a gay, whatever you call it, a gay affirming church.
Yeah.
So it traumatized me a little bit from the aspect of here I was trying to live righteous, trying to live according to the word, trying to keep myself on spot up in the world, serving God, being faithful, going through all my cash. And here we have a church next door to us that's prospering. When I say prospering, they're 300-400 people piling up in this little building. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're teaching an unrighteous, a demonic gospel. Threw me off.
Wow.
But I couldn't understand, God, what are you doing to me? They're blocking all my park. They literally filled up my parking lot like my church was full too. I had nobody in the church building, and they were full in the building next door. and my whole parking lot was full in front of my church, out my window, cars lined up.
Wow.
My church.
Let me ask you something.
Yes.
When they opened up shop, were you like, Lord, I'm done? I mean, was there ever a time you just been like, you know what, I'm done?
Man, I just couldn't understand. I mean, I don't think I was ever like I'm done. But because of how I had come back to Christ, because I went through, and I realized these are reasons why God allowed me to go through. When I went through that season of studying that guy who had written all these things to come against the Bible and tear the Bible up, and I thrown all away. When I came back to Christ, I had found so much information and understanding to strengthen my faith. I wasn't going to pull back from God per se, but I definitely questioned whether or not I was supposed to have a church at all or just have a ministry.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, they were. I was, and I said to myself that day when they piled up, even in front of my church, I said, I'm going to go out. I said, I'm going to take me a chair. I'm going to put my table in front of my church. And when those people park in front of my church to go to the church, I'm going to give them a flyer about coming to my church for prayer and for ministering to. I said, I'm going to give them a flyer. I said, I'm going to do that. And the next Sunday, there was nobody in front of my church. I didn't get a chance to put a flyer out. It was almost like in the spirit realm, Satan was like, oh, no, you don't do that. And so anyway, maybe a little while later, I was in the church Sunday morning, been prepared to preach my word to my wife and kids. She hadn't gotten to church yet.
Yeah.
And two men came in the church. And I didn't have any signs outside of my church. I don't even know how they knew it. Only way you was gonna know I had a church was because you'd either found it online and you knew the address of the church, or you had been there before. I invited you and I sent you the address. And so for somebody to come off the street in the church, it wasn't, at least at that point, I hadn't got a sign yet. So anyway, these two guys walk in the church, right?
Yeah.
One of them body was like broken. When I say broken, his teeth, his arms, his legs, every part of him was like broken in some kind of way. And he was on crutches on both arms, like little metal crutches or whatever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like he had a car wreck, but it was like that was his condition. So then there was another guy with him that was like almost 7 feet tall, and they walked in a place, and I was like, who in the world is this? I went into the room where they were, and the guy who was all broken was the one speaking. The other one wasn't saying nothing, and he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is in this place," and I was like, okay, well, awesome. I said, well, okay. I said, how did you find the church? He said I was coming to visit the church next door. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking in my mind, oh, these brothers, they some gays. I'm like, okay. And he was like, yeah. He said, we came to visit the church next door. I said, oh, okay. He said, I was wondering though, he said, could I get rest before I go down to the other church? And I'm like, okay, can you get rest? I said, all right. I said, well, go ahead and have rest. And I said to him, I said, the other church down there, I said, that's in that church, like kind of, they got, they're not right down there or whatever. I said something like that because I wasn't rebuking him, but I was just like, that church down there is like, and he looked at me and he looked at the other guy and he nodded his head. Like, we know. He said, the Lord has sent me to give a message to them. And I said, oh, okay. And so while he was sitting there, he asked me, he said, you mind if I have something to drink? And I said, yeah. And so I went and got him a cup of water. And so he was sitting there talking. The other guy never said a word. He was just standing there. The other guy sat down. The guy was broken, sat down. And I went and got him a cup of water and I gave it to him. And he drank it. And he talked just for a little bit. While he was sitting there, a guy I knew literally came through the front, never done this before, came through the front of the church, like full speed. And he said, Jay, he said, I was going to work. He said, something came over me and I just had to give this to you. He wrote me a check for the rent for the church for the month.
Wow.
He said, man, I got to go. He said, but something, I just had to get this to you. He wrote me a check for the rent for the month. And I said, well thanks, man.
Yeah, that's God.
Two guys was standing there. They was sitting. One was sitting there, and he said, "I gotta go." He left. So I looked back at the guy, and the guy just looked, and he said, "All right." He said, "Well, it's time for us to go." He said, "But thank you for allowing me to rest." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, can I keep in touch? People in the church want to keep in touch." I said, "Well, can I keep in touch with you?" He's like, "Well," he said, "we're only here very shortly. We're about to move." And so he said, "We don't stay in one place long." He said, "We're about to go." And I was like, "Okay." And so, man, they left. I looked, there was no cars in the parking lot or anything. They left. They went down to the other building or whatever. Hadn't seen them since. But man, the next week over, the windows of the church was boarded up.
Wow. Church next door?
The church. Brother, I have lived a very interesting spiritual life. I used to be concerned that, I taught other pastors, man, they never experienced it, but I had to realize that everybody's experience is different based on what God has called them to do. But I've experienced some very, very odd, strange things. But I know it was all the power and authority of God moving. But yeah, they went down. The church was gone, man. Literally gone.
Wow.
It was gone. I don't know what happened to them.
So let me ask you this: do you think they were angels?
Well, I've always thought that.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I didn't feel like that when it was happening, I didn't know what was going on. But the more and more I've talked to people about it, I've continuously, and that's what everybody says, those were angels that came to visit you. And I believe they were angels.
Yeah.
I believe I've interacted with angels on a few occasions, not many, maybe 3 or 4 total in my life. Okay. Probably more than that, but that I felt like I was dealing with an angel.
Okay.
Yeah, but I do believe they were angels. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, because now we're going into the whole deliverance thing. So can you give us a layman's definition of what deliverance ministry is? Because it's a whole lot of people that, they don't understand it. We've hear about exorcism and so forth, but what is deliverance ministry, concerning the church and so forth? I mean, the church's definition of deliverance ministry.
Well, man, you talk to 5 different deliverance ministers, you may get 4 or 5 different understandings of deliverance. Unfortunately, yeah. I happen to believe that deliverance ministry. When I first started getting into, I guess you would call it, quote, deliverance ministry, it was kind of like a specialty. You know how superheroes have they have different special powers depending on what the superhero is or whatever.
Yeah.
It was, when I first was studying it, it was almost like you're a deliverance minister, you like a special person, who's able to cast out devils, and you have this special power, but other people don't have it or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And people became, and I think it kind of started out like that when people started getting into it, because it was such unused or unoperated in ability within the church. I mean, I grew up in a Baptist church, nobody was casting out devils. I went to a Pentecostal church, nobody was casting out devils. It was such a non-used thing that when somebody was doing it or was authoritative in it, it was almost like they were specialists. And so I believe some deliverance ministers took on that role as they cast out devils. That's what they do. I personally believe that deliverance ministry is a part of the Christian believer's walk, period.
I like that. Thank you.
When I say it's not a specialty. Now, some people are well versed at it, just like anybody more well versed at some things than other people. But God did not intend for deliverance ministry to be something where you have this group of like in the Catholic Church, exorcists.
Yeah.
Church. And that's not how it was intended. You know what I'm saying? In the Bible, in Mark 16 and 17, it says, "And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils." It didn't say the special group, the one set aside. It said those that believe. It didn't say my holy apostles. It didn't say my prophets. It just said those that believe. And so deliverance, it should be something that the believer, the Christian believers as a whole, should be able to operate in.
Yeah.
And so I believe the deliverance ministry is just a part of our Christian walk, walking in what I call kingdom, the authority of the kingdom.
Yeah.
Walking the authority of the kingdom. A part of that is being able to deal with demonic spirits that look to oppress, afflict, bind up, possess, whatever, the people of God.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because, you know, the crazy thing is, it's like, you know, deliverance when it comes to the church is almost like the redheaded stepchild.
Well, man, you know, like I said, I keep it real, brother.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, pastors, leaders, man, they don't want to mess with that.
Yeah.
They don't want to mess with it. Why do they want to mess with it? They don't want to mess with it. And I know this is why God allowed me to build a church from the ground like I did. It's because it messes up your ability to grow your church.
Okay.
Listen what I'm saying when I say this.
Yeah.
You know, there's certain things that are very conducive to growth in your church.
Mm-hmm.
Non-confrontational, good music, solid preaching, you know what I'm saying? A good experience when they come, you know, a nice children's ministry, your stuff is organized. You know, people are looking for a consumer experience when they come to a church, okay? Yeah. If you begin to deal with devils in the church, the consumer experience begins to become a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you're right.
You know, because I've you know, I don't believe in devils throwing up all over your church or whatever, but I have seen people, you know, do all kind of stuff when the devil, and you don't know when the devil's going to stir up in the church. But I've seen evil spirits do all kind of stuff and get into all kind of things. So it brings confusion sometimes to the church. It brings it can bring disruption. Some people say, well, we're not going to do deliverance, you know, during church service. I get it. You know, you want to, that's something should be private or whatever. But sometimes if you're walking in authority, you don't have the ability to set aside the time because that demon wants to stir up now.
Yeah.
And so it's inconvenient. I had a pastor call me, man, it's probably about 9 years ago. I had a pastor call me, and he was dealing with, it was probably about 7 years ago, I say. He had all these sicknesses and illnesses, and he was just, all of a sudden, he was all these illnesses, all these problems and stuff. And he was calling me about deliverance. And so I began to minister and so, and I asked him, I said, you've been a pastor, a leader of a church, and he was actually a senior to me as far as age and pastoral experience per se.
Yeah.
And I said, you've done all these things. I said, what did you do when devils, and the Lord told me, I said, what did you do when evil spirits begin to manifest on people when you was praying for them? And he said, when demons begin to stir up, he said, I just stopped praying for them. I said, well, that's your problem. I said, the enemy has now come to your own doorstep, okay? Because you have not taken the authority when he rose up all those times. You did not take the authority or the mantle that God had given you to have authority over those devils. Now they're at your doorstep.
Yeah.
And if you don't deal with it, and this is what happens in the church, man.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see. Some people think that Satan's not going to attack you if you don't attack them. That's not how it works, man.
Yeah, you're right about that. He's gonna come to your house regardless.
He's gonna come to your house regardless. Now he may make you. He want to make you think, and he likes to intimidate ministers and stuff like that. He wants to make you think that, oh, now you're casting out devils. Now I'm gonna come for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wants to make you think he was already coming for you, but he may make it a more visible coming for you because you're casting out devils to cause you to be fearful and to leave it alone.
Yeah.
One thing I experienced with the devil, I did my first radio broadcast on witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
And after I did the broadcast, I was driving home one day and my truck flipped. I was going 30 miles per hour, man. A car cut me off and caused my truck to flip.
Wow.
And literally, when I tell you I was tumbling in the car,
mm-hmm.
it almost killed me. When I got in the ambulance, the ambulance driver said I was at a wreck like this last week and the guy was dead. It was the exact same thing. And I heard Satan say to me, he said, see, he said, you mess with me, I'm going to mess with you. I heard Satan say that to me.
Yeah.
And so he tries to intimidate you to make you fearful. So you say, oh, well, I'm gonna leave the devil alone. So pastors try to leave the devil alone. They don't want. I knew one pastor said, I haven't mentioned Satan's name in 15 years. Well, he doesn't have a church anymore.
Wow.
He's
Let me ask you this. Because the one thing that you said is that, some pastors, they get intimidated. And the one thing that I've seen is that I've seen guys who are in deliverance, and then, for some odd reason, they stop doing deliverance. They go into the prophetic, because the prophetic is it's a little easier and it's more popular.
Well, everybody wants to hear. There's a level of vanity in that. But people love the prophetic. They love to know what's going to happen, and money comes along with it.
Yeah.
When you prophesy, people lie to tell them all the great things. Now, there's certain type of prophecy not too profitable, but the prophecy that is telling people they're going to be blessed, they're going to get $1 million, God going to do all these wonderful and great things to them as long as they bless the prophet or align yourself with the prophet. It's a very, very, fluffy way to do ministry.
Yeah.
A true prophet is going to be striking fear in folks, going to be making folks, bringing people to repentance, but that's not really good for the cash flow. I think that some of these deliverance ministers, they like I said, like you were saying, it's probably a little bit easier for them to do that, and it's not so confrontational in the spiritual realm. And the office of a prophet or the gift of prophecy is a gift per se. This divvied out among the believers versus deliverance, which everybody should be doing, and that's the way I believe it. But I think they should be doing deliverance. If they have the gift of prophecy, they should do that also.
Yeah.
But not put deliverance to the side, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I totally agree, because I feel as though if you're a prophet, you can see things about my life, then you can also minister to me deliverance wise, because there's always an enemy that tries to come for the word.
Right.
So if God is showing you something positive, say something to get the negative off my life as well.
Right. And here's the thing, man. And one thing I found, and me being an apostle, man, sometimes me and prophets don't meld together too well, especially when they're not in the right spirit.
Yeah.
Because apostle brings things to order.
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't see apostles and prophets rolling strong sometimes, because they have a different perception on how ministry should be done. The way I've seen the prophetic properly operate in the church is that a prophet can be in a church but not be the leader of the church. You don't have to be the prophet, the man of God. You know how they say to be a prophet in the church. The prophet is someone who I'm not saying a prophet can't be a leader of the church. They can be a leader of the church, but that's not the guy's designated mantle for leading the church. Is the prophet lead the church. Yeah. But the prophet should be the one who God reveals the direction, brings comfort to the church. That's the main dynamic of the prophet. It's not this Rambo dude like we see on Facebook. It's not these Rambo cats who are out here just throwing stuff out there to Facebook for likes and cash apps, telling people how God gonna bless them. That's not what God called the prophet to do. And that's the issue that we're seeing. They want to be an Old Testament style prophet, just like Elijah out there, just being Rambo, not wanting to submit to any type of leadership, not wanting to be in order. You know what I'm saying? If God had intended for the prophets to run at things like that, he would never brought the apostles in to help establish the church.
Yeah.
Bring order to the body.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, because I think the one thing that I see a lot of renegade prophets. They don't want to submit or even come into subjection under any house. And I've seen prophets, they visit in churches, and I'm like,
they want to come and rebuke. They want to come and release a word and leave. And sometimes, most of the time, it's blessings, but sometimes they want to rebuke for gain.
Yeah.
And when I say that, to exercise an authority over someone, they'll rebuke, and we're getting into the works of the demonic, but they'll rebuke in order to gain status or position or an advantage over, or call something out to gain advantage over a leader. Listen to what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
They need to put themselves up into a certain position. To do that, they must bring down the leader. And so, like for instance, I had a young lady at my church, and she never said anything. I knew she was dealing with some stuff, but her husband was leading the worship that day, and I told him, time to stop. Okay, we're gonna go on to the next part of the service. All right. Now she was back there dancing all around with him and this and that or whatever. So I told him stop. So anyway, she got offended because she wanted her husband to keep on going. Okay. And so she said, Lord, she said, the spirit of God has a word for you, and I need to release it. So I'm always the one that encourages gifts and use the gifts. So I'll listen to somebody. Now, I'm gonna tell you if it ain't God not, but I'll listen to you. So I gave her space to speak, and she's like, God said that you stopped the worship too early, and I was like, okay. And she was like, he was not happy that you stopped the worship. You should have let it continue going on. I said, all right. I said, all right. Well, I said, I appreciate it. I said, thank you so much. And that's all I said. I said, well, thank you so much for that. I said, I felt like it was time to move forward. I said, I appreciate that. And I let it go. So I'm thinking that was the end of it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, we ended up in a probably about maybe a couple of weeks later, had an issue with her husband, and he was not being respectful for other people and towards me and some other people in the church. There was some stuff going on. And so I had a meeting, and his wife came to me. My wife sat up in the meeting also. And I was telling him that, it wasn't right how he was acting and this and that or whatever. And then his wife started saying, well, you don't receive my prophetic gift. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? I said, you're not a prophet in the church, I said, but I said, if you tell me something, I said, thank you. I take it. And so she's like, well, when I said that prophetic word, she was like, you didn't receive it. And I was like, well, what did you expect for me to do? And she was like, well, you didn't receive my word, and that was from the Lord. And I was like, I'm not under mandate to receive what you're saying if I'm not in agreement with it. I said, I didn't tell you I didn't receive it. I just said thank you. She's like, but I could tell you didn't receive what the Lord was saying for that moment. You stopped the worship.
Oh my God.
Man, I'm telling you, it was a nightmare in there, man.
Oh man.
And I was like, well, I said, well, I'm sorry. I said, and I just be honest with you. I said, I don't really feel like that was from the Lord. I said, I feel like you was enjoying your husband's worship, and and it was time for it to be over. I said, every Sunday for the last 6-7 years, if the worship was going too long, I'd stop it. I said, but at the end of service, we always had deliverance and prayer for people. I said, and plus, I said, we don't need music for the Spirit of God to move. I said, anytime you think we got to have a band and a worship and people singing for the Spirit of God to move, I said, you have stepped out of a true understanding of how God's Spirit moves. I said, we're on one accord in one place. Okay. If the music stops, the Spirit of God don't stop because the organ stopped playing and the people stopped singing. Yeah. We still in the Spirit. We go to the Word. We go to prayer. We still on one accord in one spirit. Yeah. And I told that to her. And, well, God's going to get you.
Oh, my God. See, that's my problem. That's the problem that I have with the prophetic, because it always seems that soon as you disagree, then they want to curse.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the problem that I've always had. But and I ain't gonna lie, when I first got into ministry, I ain't gonna lie, my goal was I wanted to be so versed in scripture that every renegade prophet that came across my path, I was headshot every last one of them. Seriously,
man. There's so many of them, man. And bro, there's gay prophets out here, man. I mean, there's a lot of them. Man, it's a mess. It's a mess on the prophetic side of things, on the prophet side of things. It's so much going. There's vanity, there's lust, there's just. I mean, it's just false. There's a lot of falseness going on, man. And not really being led or being willing to submit. Now, I've run across some true prophets of God, you know, but they're very humble. They're not boastful. They're truly submitted to God. One of the strongest prophecies that I got, or prophetic words, I'll say, that I got from a prophet was I could barely hear her speak. She wasn't even looking. She was looking down at the ground. She came she was in a completely humble space and completely submitted to the Spirit of God. And she said what the Lord told her. And she looked at me and she said, you know what I'm talking about, right? And I looked at her and I said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And she said, that's all I have. And she walked on. That's the type of prophet I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it's not even about what they say. It's the spirit that drives it is what matters.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If it's a rebuke, that's okay. If it comes in the right spirit, let's receive it, repent, change, and do better.
Yeah. Yeah, they know protocol, but a lot of them don't.
No protocols, no align yourself with the prophet, none of that type of stuff. You know, it's all about the Lord operating through a man or woman of God, giving them a word to give to leaders or to give to the people, so that they may be blessed, whether it's bring them to repentance or give them comfort and peace and rest, give them deliverance. Sometimes a prophetic word will bring somebody to deliverance.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it's about. It's about being a humble vessel, not being puffed up, not being vain. That's what Satan does.
Yeah. When
you elevate yourself and your gift, that's a work of Satan. So anyway, I mean, I can keep on going about this, brother.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah, we definitely going to do another show. That's the God knows truth. So let me ask you this. I know a while back I actually saw a post on Facebook about a Christian witch, and I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Christian witchcraft in the church.
Well, I think I know what church you're talking about. I won't say the name, but
okay.
The church you're talking about is in the Atlanta area, and I do believe that church is led by a pastor, and he has a first husband. That's what he called it. And then they brought in a woman who is, this is the same story. They brought in a woman who is a witch. She's a psychic or whatever. But they call themselves Christians, but they brought in a woman who's like, you know, she's in the witchcraft, you know, psychic readings, palm readings, all that type stuff. But she's also in the Christian church. We also see that we see it starting to pop up in different parts of the country where witches are starting to say, in black and white churches, where witches are starting to say they can be Christian and witchcraft, it doesn't go against God and this and that or whatever. I think the boldness that we see coming out, it just comes from the access to information and also social media, making people feel confident in what they are and who they are. But here's the thing with social media: no matter what you say, if you can find all the people that agree with what you say, you can get 100 likes per post. Even if those 100 people are only 100 people to feel the same way you get, you can be assured every day by your foolishness, because you'll get the likes because you had those people wrapped around you. And so people have been confirmed in all their foolish beliefs. I was actually going to do a post about that online, just to spike some of those people I see doing this. But there's people out here, man, that's professing scriptures and doctrines and understandings and belief structures online that never walked any type of walk. They've never ever been called by God, who don't have a true revelation, that are influencing people through social media and also being confirmed in the foolishness they're talking because someone likes it or someone pats someone on the back for posting it.
Yeah.
That has been one of the biggest issues we've seen. And I think that's why you're seeing all these weird type of mindsets popping up, because people are confirming them by agreeing with them.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. The spirit of deception, because I think the one thing that happens with a lot of churches is that their intentions are good, but then the spirit of deception comes in, and next thing you know, what started off being good ends up being twisted. So what do you think about that?
Well, it's the lack of discernment. I mean, it's people not. Here's the thing, man. You put if you have you put a billboard up and say prophets coming to town. He has a great gift of prophecy, the prophetic. I'll tell you the future. Man, people are they'll be excited to hear. It's a gift that gets waved, is put in high esteem. You know what I'm saying? But if you put on that same sign, interpreter of tongues is coming to town, nobody's gonna show up. If you put on there, they got great wisdom, nobody's gonna come. And so discernment is part of the gifts that God gives us, but it's not paraded as something being grand or something to coalesce around, because it's not flashy.
Yeah.
But it's needed in every part of ministry. And if you're not able to discern the work of the enemy, you let all types of demonic stuff up in your church. And I've seen it. Man, yoga going on in churches, preachers full of Jezebels and Jezebel spirits, and preachers full of lust. All types of. I had a business one time, a commercial cleaning company, and there was a Baptist church who during Halloween, their whole school was full of witches and spiders and spider webs hanging from the ceiling. For like 2 or 3 months of the year, they would have this whole thing with all this demonic stuff hanging from the ceiling in the church building.
Wow, that's crazy.
What's going on? Their natural mind had told them that this is okay. It's witches for fun. But they didn't discern the depth, the darkness that they were allowing to come, even in the church. They were normalizing the demonic. And that's what we even see in society today, that people's ability to discern is being watered down and being diluted to the place where they can't discern Satan and God. And they're looking at people for face value versus what the Spirit of God is showing. You can have somebody come to your church, and I'm gonna tell you, and this has happened 99% of church. If somebody comes to your church and writes a check for $10,000 to the pastor, okay, that pastor gonna treat him good or her good.
Yeah.
Because of the face value of what's given.
Yeah.
That person could be literally Satan themselves. But if you can't discern it, it will allow that person to creep up in your church, get a position in your church, and begin to influence and take people's souls away from the things of God. One good example is with Paul and the woman with the spirit of divination. How did she approach Paul? Paul was being run and beaten and kicked out of town, all that types of stuff. How did she approach Paul? She had rich men walking with her. She came to Paul and she said, "Oh, this is Paul, a great man of God. He's going to show us the way to salvation." And she had wealthy men in tow. Okay. If Paul had not have had the gift of discernment to see the darkness of what she was bringing to the table, now it doesn't say whether or not he knew naturally she had a gift of divination or not, but he knew that was a demonic spirit, and he wasn't willing to accept what she was bringing to the table. Even though she brought wealthy men, she was talking highly, people was listening to her. Men of influence was listening to her. They could have said, "Look, follow Paul, give Paul money, help Paul's ministry go forward." And this is what happens in the church.
Yeah.
Is that somebody comes with money, resources, this and that or whatever, and they'll say, "Oh, I love your church, I love your ministry, I'm gonna give to them, I'm gonna do this, whatever. And they are literally setting you up for your defenses to be down to when they begin to pour in the demonic things, the unrighteous things, to begin to influence your ministry, the call of God, to go in the direction that God has not called it to go in. And that's what Paul saw. And that's why Paul cast that devil out of her.
Yeah.
But see, here's the thing. The pastors don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to. Paul got beat up and thrown in prison for that, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they got mad after that. You
got
messed
him.
up my money.
So he went from that. They obviously they had some influence, right?
Yeah.
They did that to him because he cast the devil out of a woman. Okay, because she had brought those men much gain. Those are the men of influence, men of power. Okay, your average man of God that's not walking this. I'll say this: that's not walking in discernment. Okay, will allow his flesh and his need to promote and move his ministry forward, cause him to overlook certain things, and this is how Satan creeps in. Overlook certain things, even when they have deliverance, your heart gets tried.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, when they have the gift of discernment, their heart gets tried because you may discern that it's evil, but the lust, your natural desires, your will for things to go forward, or even people even begin to rationalize coming into agreement with things they even discern. Many times they can't discern it, but even when they discern something that's not 100% right, they'll still come into an agreement with it because their other desires trump that warning sign that they're getting. And this is where people get in so much trouble, man.
Wow.
But oftentimes they just can't. They just don't know, man. They just. I've met pastors. I've met. I'm gonna stop saying pastors. I've met leaders of churches that have amulets and rings on that were obviously demonic. I was sitting there talking to a leader one time, and I looked at his ring he had, and I was like, that ring is straight demonic. And even had demonic symbols all over. I didn't need to see in the spirit that was demonic. It had demonic symbols on it.
Did he know it?
He didn't know. I said, hey, man. I didn't want to call him out because we were somewhere public. I said, hey, man. I said, where'd you get the ring? He said, man, I found this ring at a such and such store, man. It looked good on it. I was like, I just like, all right, brother. I left him alone.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. If you don't have discernment, then Satan is able to gain an advantage over you. Yeah. And this is why he fights so much against his gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing with me having a discernment gift, sometimes I try to manage it because I see so many things that's not right versus what I'm seeing in the natural that seems right.
Yeah.
Sometimes I try to block it out as maybe I'm being paranoid. Sometimes when you have the gift of discernment, you got to be careful of being paranoid because some people say, oh, I see a demon around every corner.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be careful that you don't get caught up in paranoia. But what I've seen time and time again, when the Lord is showing me things, it doesn't matter how nice the person is, this and that, they've been around, they've been with you, this and that or whatever. When the Lord begins to show you stuff, put up that warning sign. Don't ever push to the back saying you're thinking too hard into it, you're this and that or whatever. You don't have to call the person out. You don't have to confront them because the Lord showed you something that wasn't right, unless he tells you to do it. But always let that warning flag stay there.
Yeah.
Learn that.
Yeah.
And once I got to a place where I let the warning flag stay, even though I didn't say nothing to them, I let it stay there time and time again. The things that I was seeing well before, a year, 2 years before, would begin to manifest. And I would say, wow, the Lord has been showing me that all along.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
That's great. I'm telling you, that is definitely great. I want to get your opinion on this. And I know this wasn't part of the questions. What about pastors being Masons?
Man, you can't you can't mix the light and the darkness, man. That's what my movie was about.
Yeah. But you see a lot of that.
Yeah. Once again, and you see it in the denominations that typically not as spiritual. I don't ever call any denomination unspiritual if they hold the standard beliefs of the Bible. But your denominations that are less spiritual, Methodists, Baptists, I'll just use those two examples. You see more of that just because those people they're not focusing on the gifts. They definitely on the deliverance. They're not trying to. It's just a lot of things spiritually that they kind of just don't do. I know in one church, a guy came and just was about to put some oil on some people, and they kicked him out of the church because they don't do stuff like that. They don't want nobody. I mean, it was just, so I think you see that in those churches because those people aren't being taught. I grew up in a Baptist church, and when I was coming out of that deception that I experienced when I was in my early 20s, I started to learn the truth, the real truth, and have a clear understanding. I came to my pastor of the Baptist church, and I said, hey, I said, why, all this stuff. I'm trying the Bible. I said, why did you don't ever teach this, man? I said, man, I'm literally walk away from God for good because I didn't know these things. I didn't have a clarity about Scripture. And he said to me, he said, well, people don't want to hear that. He said, they want to feel good on Sunday morning. And I looked at him and he's like, and then he asked me, he said, hey, you want to be over the education for the church? And I'm like, man, I'm just 21 years old. I don't have I'm just literally a babe in Christ. And he's trying to make me over education in church, all because I took some time and studied. Yeah. And then that shows you the level of depth that was absent in the church, when he was looking at me as someone who had depth, and I was just literally in the infancy of my understanding of the things of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So hey, let's go into your film, The Light and the Darkness. How did you come up with that concept, and what was that journey like?
Well, it was a culmination of my experiences, Apostle Hopkins' experiences, and also Derek Prince's experiences. The Lord had been dealing with me, of course, with the gifting of discernment, discerning devils and evil spirits, about the need for the people of God to be able to understand what goes on, as we said in the movie, behind the scenes. Is having a revelation, and a lot of people don't know. They just literally, man, they just don't know. Or if they do know, they don't have much depth of understanding, and so they're not effective in dealing with it. And so what happens? It's, I know demons exist, but I don't really deal with that. And so this film was designed to really, really open people's eyes and to get ministers and leaders and people of God start asking questions. Ask your leader questions. I've had so many people come to me. One lady in particular, she was going to this large church in downtown Atlanta, and they talked about a lot of stuff in the church or whatever, but she had no idea about deliverance or witchcraft or anything. She asked me, she was like, I go to this big church and they have all these classes. She said, why have I never heard this? Because she was somebody involved in church. She said, why have I never heard this? Because it's not being taught.
Yeah.
And, so that's what the film is for. The film is to really open people's eyes, to have people start asking questions, man, and to challenge the lies and the deception, to let them know, hey, there's a true minister of God, there's an apostle that's coming your way, and he's going to be exposed and all this. That was just a first of many, many films that are going to be hitting the airwaves for people to see, to begin to expose from a true biblical and spirit-led perspective the deceptions, the darkness that goes on behind the scenes, that the people of God may be strengthened, encouraged, and have the ability to fight and to win. Because if you don't have discernment, man, everything is defiled. If your foundation is not, if there's not discernment in your foundation, then everything that's built upon it is defiled. If people want to go after the prophetic gift, well, if you ain't got discernment, your prophetic gift is going to be, more than likely, 99% chance is going to be defiled, because you're not going to be able to tell. I tell people there's three voices that you hear. You hear yourself, you hear God, and you hear the devil. And if you can't pull out God out of that and speak to people, then you're going to be telling people lies from the pits of hell, or you're going to be speaking to people out of the flesh. Yeah. But if you can't discern and divide those things, then you become ineffective. So you become what I call spiritually compromised.
Wow. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. You didn't hit the nail on the head with that one. So let me ask you this. How'd you get the cast together?
I just put out a casting call. As far as the leaders, Hopkins, I have been following him online, and we connected. Uh-huh. And awesome. I'll tell you, Apostle Albert Hopkins is an awesome, amazing man of God. I tell you what, if I've had a template for a man of God that is operating in that arena of deliverance, he is the archetype and template for that. Just an awesome man of God. One thing I had experienced with a lot of deliverance ministers, especially back in the day, is that a lot of them were angry, and they had a very rough and mean way about them. Yeah. they may have been a deal with devil. I understand why some of them may have been like that because of all the messed up stuff they had to deal with, and they just became very, very just it's a hard. It can be hard sometimes if you're doing that all the time. Just because all the sad stories and sadness that you deal with when people are demonically oppressed. But Hopkins has so much joy, so much peace. He has all the fruits of the spirit. So I was really blessed to connect with him and get him on the film. He's actually going to be on some of our other films that we have coming out. Derek Prince Ministries, I picked up the phone, told him my vision, and the president of Derek Prince Ministries jumped on board. So it was a blessing to get him on there. Another woman that I had on there, she actually was a high-ranking witch in the Atlanta area.
Okay.
She was like literally under assault and being chased down by demons because she was trying to get away from witchcraft. And she came to my church, and I was a part of her process of getting her delivered out of the spirit of witchcraft. So she agreed to come on and share her testimony with coming out of witchcraft and the devices tied in with that. And then everybody else was just volunteers, man. They just wanted to come and do the reenactments and volunteer and help out with the movie. So it's definitely a God thing, and I look forward to the next one.
Oh yeah, because I was up there thinking, I was like, what was coming to my mind with you was he is developing a production company.
Yes.
So I just want to say thank you, because I think the one thing that we need to see, more documentaries, more films that is going to put, ministry in spotlight, but also freedom and deliverance. Because, I look at it, okay, what do you get after the flash? You know what I mean? Because you walk into a prophetic atmosphere, but do you walk out of there free? Do you walk out of there delivered? Do you walk out of there healed and restored? Because, we need that. We need that.
Right.
Not only do we need it in our church services, we need it in some of the things that we watch as well. But I love the fact that you pulled that cast together. I was like, wow, man, he got Apostle Fagani, Apostle Hopkins. Oh my God. Yeah. Derek Prince. And I mean, it was just good. And I love, the story. So let me ask you this. How can people stream it? How can people buy or rent the film?
It is available. I know I tell people the easiest way is if you want to stream it right away, there's two different places you can go. The first one is Amazon. It's right there on Amazon. You can just go search The Light and the Darkness. It'll pop up. Or you can go to we actually have a Christian or faith-based streaming platform. I actually just launched that here about a month ago. It's called Saltflix.
Oh, okay.
And, you can go on there and you can watch it on Saltflix. It's saltflix.com. And we have that movie and several other spiritual warfare movies and other Christian movies on that platform. So you can either go to Amazon or you can go to saltflix.com and you can watch the film. Now, also, if you want to order a DVD from us, we still have some DVDs available. You can just go to kingdomauthority.org. That's kingdomauthority.org. Kingdom Authority is our media production division. But kingdomauthority.org, and you'll be able to order the DVD copy of the film.
Wow, that's great. So let me ask you this. So how did God put that in your heart to start the production company?
Well, man, that was, and that's a long story, but
oh, you know what? Yeah, we can come back.
Say what now?
I said we can always do a part two.
Yeah, no, that there's a whole another branch of me that we haven't even talked about in the show.
Okay.
But a part of I've done television ministry. Part of my ministry though is to do film and television.
Okay.
And that's kind of where the Saltflix came from. It's kind of where Kingdom Authority and Kingdom Authority Films. The Light and the Darkness is the first edition of films from Kingdom Authority Films. We have Light and Darkness 2, which is an African witchcraft documentary coming out here in the next couple of months.
Okay.
We also have the False Prophet, which is a movie literally on false prophets documentary coming out 2021. And so it's been a part of me from the beginning. I've been doing television production. The Lord has been just dealing with me about putting more films and works out to be able to influence people. And so that side of me, you're going to see a lot more of going forward. I'm not just a church minister from an aspect of some people, they build local churches and stuff like that. I do that, but I also have a broadcast ministry that's going to come through film and television. And so that's just as large as what we're doing on the church side of things.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely got to get you back because I was going to ask you whether you were going to do a sequel to Light and the Darkness.
Yes.
So, we definitely got to talk about that African witchcraft because there's a whole lot, to that. So, hey, is there, let me ask you this. Is there a chance that maybe you might do a documentary on the history of deliverance? Because, we seen God's Generals with Robert Laird, and he did that. But, you never see anything on people that have ministered deliverance, like Wim Worley, Apostle Hopkins, and I was actually thinking like, yeah, man, we need to know the history, and how, the pioneers, started it because, who's going to carry the sword into the, for the next generation and the generations to come unless we know the history.
Well, man, the deliverance ministry is going the way it's always gone. Unfortunately, like you said, who's going to carry the torch for it? But a lot of these newer guys coming up, they're not doing deliverance, man. Even some of these places that call themselves fivefold, it was amazing to me. I had people come to me and they said they don't do deliverance once every 90 days.
Once every 90 days?
Yeah, they do. They do deliverance once every 9 days. It's. There's a rich history in deliverance ministry. Those who focused on that, there's a rich ministry, and I definitely think a documentary will help bring people back. One of the issues I did run into, even though I got to what I consider the top guys in that arena, the top ministries, Hopkins and Derek Prince, I don't think I could have gotten any stronger people for the documentary. But it's very difficult to get people to be a part of films, even documentaries on, I encounter a lot of resistance. Not from Pagani was nice, Hopkins was nice, and Derek Prince was nice. But man, there's a lot of resistance, a lot of distrust, a lot of, remember I tell you about the paranoia and stuff people experience?
Yeah.
Not knowing who to trust. I mean, it's just all types of stuff, man, that you encounter. So I'd be open to it, but we encounter a lot of just resistance from trying to bring in more people because we were doing a good work, but some people just they don't know you, and that was one of the things. So it's harder. I would like to do it, but I would definitely need a team of people to help bring these people together so that we can put together a powerful work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, I'm going to pray that God does it. I'm going to pray that God will bring, people that'll help, put that thing together because we definitely need it. So how can people follow you?
Well, they can definitely follow me on Facebook, go to James Alford, or they can look up Kingdom Authority. And just follow me right on there, and that's about it. Or they can go to my website at jamesalford.org, and they can get tied in with the articles that I write.
Okay, all right. So how can people sow into the ministry?
Well, they can go to jamesalford.org, or they can go to our church page at rmichurch.com, and they can sow right there.
Okay. Well, hey, look, I appreciate you. So, hey, can you leave us with some words of wisdom and encouragement?
I would say for all those who have the gift of discernment, don't let that gift die. Stay encouraged for the things that God is showing you. Be prayerful about everything that's revealed to you, and allow God to raise you up in discernment. And as the gift of deliverance comes, don't be fearful of it, but let God use you in it. And know that deliverance is a ministry. Doing deliverance is a ministry of love. Okay, when you're setting people free, when you're delivering them, when you get them free from the bondages of Satan, it is a ministry of love. So know that you're doing love work, and be encouraged. Keep running forward. God has a great, great, great work in store for you.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Alford. I so appreciate you, sir, because I'm not going to lie. You've opened up my eyes to a lot of things, and a lot of things that I'm like, okay, Lord, I need to I need to start praying more about certain things. Definitely discernment, because it has to be stronger in this next phase and season of life. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on the platform this morning.
Hey, well, thank you for having me. God bless you. And, I'll be happy to come on anytime you like, man, and we can talk about stuff.
Oh, yeah, I definitely want to have you on about, that production company. So, yeah, that'll definitely be the next interview.
Okay, well, God bless you.
God bless you, too. You have a blessed day, sir. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Right. Bye. Well, guys, that was Pastor James Alford, Apostle James Alford. Oh, my God. Director, producer. This man, oh my God, he is one of God's generals. I'm just calling that as it is. Man, I can't wait to put this up online because, guys, you got to hear it. I'm telling you, his testimony is phenomenal. He is a gift of God. So with that being said, guys.
Walk in the truth that makes you free every day. Follow Brother Leon on all social media outlets.